obviously the Aosu V7 is the new cube here, so I'm going to leave that for last since it's the more exciting one. For the Gun 562, I've kind of reviewed it on my channel before already, but it was a borrowed cube, but now I've finally decided to get my own copy, and the reason why I delayed so long was I partly got a bit busy and I didn't really have much time for cubing, so I just didn't have the need to order one. Plus I wanted to wait for more good products to come out and then just ordering the whole thing as a set, so this thing came out. The Ultron V6 also got announced and kind of made me a bit hesitant about this, but in the end I decided that this one has very interesting mechanism. It really adds a lot of value to cube design as a whole, so I still wanted to have a copy of this. First turns is, this is actually my first time doing first turns on the Gun 562 because my entire review was made of a borrowed copy and it's actually a lot slower than I imagine it to be. Obviously I know this cube can be much faster than what it currently is because I've literally already made a whole video on that, but for now I think it needs some setup. The main highlight for this video, Aosu V7. Again, actually this is really good out of the box. It feels almost like my Aosu WRM. So yeah, here's my WRM. This out of the box feels like my well set up and well broken in Aosu WRM. But right now actually this cube is really nice and I think it's actually ready to compete right out of the box. Okay, maybe the corner cutting is... the cube might do well with a slightly looser tension and a bit more loop. One of the most glaring things about this cube when you just look at it outright is just how big the outer layers are compared to the inners. There are 4 cubes that I want to compare the V7 with in terms of size. So first two, obviously the Aosu WRM and the Meilong, these two are 59mm, stand a little bit taller than this cube, which is 58. Also, when it comes to layer sizing, the Meilong actually has the most equal of the layer size, 15 on the outer and 14.5 on the inner, and the outer of this cube is actually bigger than the Meilong. And compared with the Aosu WRM, this is 14.5 inner and 15.5 outer. The outers seem to be about the same size as the WRM, but the inners obviously shrink in size. The VIN and the MGC, to me, they're quite irrelevant ever since I played with 59mm 4x4 and didn't want to go back to 60 anymore. For those of you who like 60mm 4x4s, you might still prefer that end of the spectrum, but for now I'm actually going down in the spectrum. So this is the Chi and Pro, marketed to be 58.5, and it's sort of like the third main cube that I cycle around between this, the WRM and the Meilong. And I mainly got this cube partly because of the size, but now the WRM actually managed to beat that by 0.5 mm. And finally, I've got the mech 4x4 V1. This cube was designed by me specifically to be 58. It stands at exactly the same size as the Aosu V7. The Aosu V7 still has a slightly bigger outer and slightly smaller inner compared to the mech 4x4 V1. I know some people have complained about the triple track inner magnets being too strong and too different from the outer. Right now I can feel a bit of a difference between the two, but I don't find it annoying. And I also do have a mod idea to weaken the inners. I'm planning to make a second video for this cube, also going over the magnet tech and explaining what's really going on with the magnet tech. For this video I'll just focus more on the mechanism. What I'm going to do now is go through the history of the Aosu as well, actually explain the piece mechanism all the way back in 2014, which this cube kind of marks the 10th year anniversary of the Aosu. Moi actually released the original V1, which I do not have on hand, but in 2015, the year after they released the mini Aosu, this is 60mm, the older version is. Mechanism is also very similar to the original. In fact, it's the same, the inner mechanism is the same. The only difference is the layer sizing is a little different, meaning like this vertical part here that like it extends the mechanism into a solid cube. Like this vertical line here is shifted a little bit inwards because the original cube is all 15.5. So, but whereas the second cube is all 15 in terms of layer ratio, so they actually shifted this line slightly inwards, but the inside is actually 100% just copy. Here, there's a little bit of a bulge, just like the Moi Weilong. And at the bottom, there are 2 anchors, and the inner anchor is much bigger. The one that's outside is much smaller. Credit actually goes to the V1, but since the V2 is exactly the same mechanism, I'm going to say the same 4x4s as well as most big cubes these days. And they all use double anchor. This is the first mechanism to really use the double anchor in its modern form. The question arises to what actually is the Aosu V3, but in 2017, like sometime after the Uchi, I actually did not switch the Uchi as my main because I found another batch of mini Aosu. It's the same mechanism as V2, but it actually has primary internals, while the original one has white internals. I'm not too sure how well the camera can pick it up, but seeing them in real life, you can actually see the difference. I'm not too sure what has changed about this cube, possibly the plastic quality, but when I first tried it, it felt much better than this one. Okay, the original Aosu, like the V1 was good. The V2, which is the mini, had some complaints where it was slow out of the box, and I do find that this cube was quite slow. This one was actually fast. I'm not too sure if this constitutes as a V3 because it's just a copy-paste of the same mechanism, but it's such a jump in quality over the V2. If I don't count it as a V3, there would actually be a missing version count. And also, this one is not factory magnetic. During those days, magnets were just starting to gain popularity, and this is one of the first cubes that I magnetized myself. It also became quite a lot better after I put it in the magnets. The Aosu V4 in that case, although I stuck the Kong's design here and I forgot to bring it to the table earlier, it's the Aosu GTS1. And the Aosu GTS1 actually slightly violated the meaning of Aosu because it lacked the Weilong wing that the earlier versions have. But other than that, it still stays quite faithful to the definition. So the Weilong wing is missing, but you can still see two anchors. The bottom one is obviously bigger than the top one. Relatively more recently, its mechanism has also been 100% copy-pasted to make another cube, which is the RS4M. 5 would be the GTS2. This one, I don't have it on hand, but I can show you pictures from my older video. And it actually brought back the Weilong wing. Another thing to point out about the GTS2 is that the corner tips are squared off. So going on to the Aosu V6, the Aosu WRM. So again, you can see the Weilong wing here. You can see two anchors. The outer one is smaller, and then the one that goes deeper in the cube is much bigger. Finally, when we get to the V7, obviously they size the cube down a bit more, but and we can still see the Weilong wing here. And it also has the squared off tip that the GTS2 had. But one difference that this cube has compared to all the earlier versions is that now the two anchors are now similar in size to each other. And this design is actually a bit more similar to the Meilong 4x4. See, this has two big anchors, whereas this has one big anchor. And one major thing brought about by this change is just the stability difference. Like usually the cubes with two big anchors are more stable than those with one big anchor and one small anchor, but this design has been doing relatively well in 4x4. In fact, for I would say 9 years, this one is the 10th, this one represents the 10th year. For 9 years, the mechanism of the Aosu actually almost never changed. It's as though the perfect 4x4 was already made in 2014, and the only thing left to do beyond that point is just to, if you have a higher quality manufacturing process, then you just make the cube in higher definition and make it a bit lighter and faster, and that's about it. But like on the parallel universe compared to 4x4, that is the universe of big cubes. That's when the turning style is a bit different because the stability demand for like 5x5, 6x6 and 7x7 is higher than that of 4x4, where you still want to take advantage of more corner cutting. So in 5x5 and above, there is a clear winner when it comes to like having two big anchors. As for 4x4, the winner is not so clear. Like stability does produce a nice feel, which is why I still like the Meilong 4, and there were also a few other 4x4s that also temporarily took over as the best for a while before the Aosu came back and took the title back like multiple times in history. And those cubes also tend to have two bigger anchors. Like I think the only example I can think of is the Wuche, but I do think that the Meilong is, well, this one didn't exactly knock off the Aosu from the title of best 4x4. It does feature like two big anchors, and it's also more on the stable side. So it's a little bit of, I would say, kind of deviation from what makes Aosu and Aosu to feature two relatively bigger anchors in the V7, but yeah, it does help with the stability quite a fair bit, and stability is generally a theme of like with the design of this cube. I might have forgotten to mention that older versions were also completely solid inside. It's just that people discovered that it's better to have torpedoes, so if you can hollow the corner, then the mech can have a torpedo to go underneath. But this is not a very specific change. It happened to all cubes across the board, not just the Aosu, so that's why I didn't point it out earlier.